This story is generated and narrated by AI. If you notice any glitches in the voice, feel free to leave a comment. Your feedback helps improve future videos. Have you ever been invited to a quiet village deep in the countryside, where everyone smiles a little too long, and the traditions are just a bit too old? I thought it would be peaceful, but what I found was a nightmare cloaked in hospitality. This is the Willowvale Offering. I received the letter on a damp Tuesday morning. The envelope was made of thick, fibrous paper, yellowed at the edges like it had traveled far through time rather than distance. No return address, only my name written in a neat, cursive hand I didn't recognize. Inside, the message was short. To Mr. Callum Wright, we of Willowvale extend our invitation for the observation of the spring processional as part of your study on the preservation of England's dying rural traditions. We trust your eye for detail will do justice to our rites. The tide turns on the first full moon of April, arrived 2 nights prior. Sincerely, H. Beale. I read it 3 times. The phrase tide turns lingered with odd weight. I had not heard of Willowvale before, and I'd researched dozens of remote British customs for my dissertation. That's exactly why I accepted. The train ride north was long and uneventful. I transferred at 2 minor stations before arriving at a stop so small it didn't have a name, just a rusted sign and a bench swallowed by brambles. A driver waited for me, a man in his 60s with silent eyes and teeth stained dark. He didn't speak, only nodded when I said, "Willowvale." We rode in silence for nearly an hour. The roads narrowed until they weren't roads at all, just dirt paths winding between hedgerows and gnarled oak trees. The forest thickened until I felt swallowed. Then, without warning, the land opened. A valley stretched out like a wound in the landscape. Tucked into the folds of green and brown sat the village, Willowvale, as though it had been forgotten by the rest of England. Mr. Beale was waiting at the gate to the village. He wore a dark wool coat buttoned to his throat and a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows over sharp cheekbones. You arrived just before the dew dried. Perfect timing. He spoke with an accent I couldn't quite place. Old Hampshire, perhaps, or something older than that. He gripped my hand with surprising strength and welcomed me like an old friend. His eyes were bright and unreadable, like a man hiding something behind impeccable manners. He led me to a cottage that had been prepared. It was charming in its way, low-ceilinged and full of mismatched furniture. The fireplace was already lit, the flames unusually blue. There'll be stew at the hall come sundown. But I suspect you'll want to rest your bones first. He smiled, but something about it didn't feel entirely sincere. The village was smaller than I expected, maybe 20 houses at most, arranged in a circle around a sunken green. At its center stood a crooked chapel made of lichen-covered stone. The bell tower leaned slightly, like it had grown tired of standing upright. People moved through the village slowly, deliberately. All wore neutral-colored clothing, rough-spun and practical. They acknowledged me with polite nods, but none offered words. None smiled, except for her. I met Alice near the edge of the village. She was tending to a twisted pear tree, coaxing fruit from its brittle branches. She looked about my age, late 20s, though her eyes held more winters than mine. "You're not from here," she said without looking up. "Is it that obvious?" I chuckled. "You still look up when you walk. You haven't learned to keep your eyes low yet." She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. I asked about the spring processional. Her expression faltered. "It's not what you think, whatever they told you. It's not what it seems." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You should leave before the dew dries tomorrow, if the road's still there." Then she picked up her basket and walked away. Dinner was held in a long timber hall at the north end of the village, with smoke hung in the air. Stew bubbled over the hearth. Mr. Beale sat at the head of the table, a quiet authority. The villagers joined one by one. None sat too close to me, but all watched. Some openly, others from the corner of their eyes. I asked Beale if I could begin interviews tomorrow, to record oral history, gather details of the rite. He sipped from a clay cup and nodded. "Oh yes, we've been waiting for you to see it, to truly see it." He placed a hand on my shoulder and leaned in. "You have the right eyes and the right timing." That night I couldn't sleep. The wind outside carried a sound I couldn't place. Not quite a song, not quite a moan, but something in between. I pulled the curtains closed tighter and tried not to listen. The next morning, I woke to frost on the inside of the window pane. Though it was mid-April, the air carried a sharp, almost metallic chill. A flock of crows circled above the green, their cries discordant and frantic. It sounded like warning or mourning. I dressed quickly and stepped outside. The village had changed in the light. What looked rustic by twilight now seemed worn thin by time. Thatched roofs sagged lower, wood warped with damp. Windows were dark, their glass like old eyes reluctant to blink. No one was outside, no children playing, no animals wandering, just a stillness that stretched across the stone paths like fog, until Mr. Beale appeared. He greeted me with the same too-wide smile. "Walk with me, Mr. Wright. There's much to see before the sun climbs too high." We circled the village green, passing the crooked chapel and a disused well. I noticed small talismans nailed to door frames, bundles of dried herbs bound with red twine, feathers tucked into bark. "What are these?" I asked. "Wards," he said, without slowing his pace. "Old habits, older than most remember. They keep what needs to stay out, and what needs to stay in." We stopped at a field on the village's edge. In its center stood a structure I hadn't noticed before, a wooden latticework shaped like a towering cone, roughly 10 feet high, blackened near the base as if scorched long ago. Mr. Beale removed his hat and bowed slightly toward it. "This is the hard pole." He turned to me. "It is where the procession ends, and where the offering is made." I felt a tightness in my throat. "You keep referring to this offering, but no one's explained what it actually is." Beale's eyes glittered. "It's not something one can describe, not truly. It must be witnessed." Later that day, I finally found Alice again. She stood by the crooked chapel, holding a shallow basket of crushed white flowers. She didn't smile this time. "You saw the heart pull." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, and it raised more questions than answers." She hesitated, glanced over her shoulder, then spoke quickly. "They burn something there every spring. Not logs, not crops, something alive." My stomach twisted. "An animal?" I asked. Her silence answered for her. "Why doesn't anyone stop it?" I demanded. She looked up, her eyes not angry but exhausted. "Because the year they didn't, we lost everything. The rain stopped, the forest blackened, the children." She trailed off. I asked her who, or what, the offering was for. She didn't reply. Instead, she pointed toward the woods beyond the village. "They live out there, in the hollows beneath the roots, in the dark that doesn't lift even at noon." A long pause. "And they remember promises, even if we forget them." I returned to my cottage, head spinning. Something inside me wanted to leave. Now, walk until the roads widened and the signal bars returned to my phone. But I didn't. Maybe it was professional curiosity. Maybe something deeper. I need to understand. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I noticed more villagers emerging from their homes. Each held something wrapped in cloth, bones, dried flowers, stones carved with strange symbols. They placed them at the foot of the heart pole. One by one, in complete silence, an old woman wept softly as she tied a lock of hair to the frame. I could not move. That night, the dreams returned, or perhaps they weren't dreams at all. I saw the chapel door creak open without a hand, saw figures move through the fog, tall and thin, too tall, Their limbs were wrong, too long, too fluid. They whispered in a language that tasted like rot. A sound that didn't enter my ears so much as grow inside my skull. And at the center of it all, the harp hole pulsed with heat, the lattice glowing faintly, like it had a heartbeat of its own. I awoke in darkness, but I wasn't alone. There was breathing, not mine, slow and wet, like something trying to remember how lungs worked. I froze. The sound circled the room, a shuffle of bare feet on stone. In silence, I didn't move until light broke the horizon. By the following afternoon, the village had changed again, but this time, it wasn't the buildings or the air, it was the people. They no longer smiled when they saw me. They didn't speak, didn't even nod. They simply moved, together, like a flock steering itself without signal. Mr. Beale knocked on my door just after sundown. His face was grave now. No warmth, no performance. It begins tomorrow night. You'll be allowed to watch. From the southern rise, near the elder stones, he placed a lantern in my hands. No matter what you see or hear, do not step onto the field. I opened my mouth to ask something, anything, but he was already walking away. Alice came to me later, her movements fast and furtive. She pushed a folded map into my hands, her fingers trembling. This is where you'll stand. It's safe, for the most part, but when they light the harp hole, leave. Go straight back to your cottage and stay there. Her eyes were red, not from crying. Something else, like smoke or lack of sleep. Will they hurt someone? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped close, her voice barely audible. It's not a ritual of gratitude. It's a bargain. And if they ever stop paying, it comes down from the trees. That night, the village was completely dark. No lights in the windows, no torches near the paths, only the faint glow of candles flickering behind the warped glass of the chapel, and a strange humming that vibrated through the soil, a low, pulsing tone like a beehive inside the earth. I didn't sleep. I sat near the door, the lantern unlit, holding the map in one hand and my phone in the other. No signal, just the clock slowly crawling toward midnight. At some point, I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes, I was no longer alone. There was a figure in the doorway, not moving, not speaking, just standing there. Its body was human, or close to it, but its posture was wrong, like it had been bent forward for too many years and forgotten how to stand straight. The lantern flared to life on its own, and when the light touched its face, I screamed. It had no eyes, just smooth, pale skin where sockets should be. Its mouth opened slowly, impossibly wide, like the skin was stretching, not the jaw. No words came out, just a low hiss, wet and gurgling, like wine through a clogged drain. And then it turned and walked away, not through the door, but into the wall, as if it had never been there. I didn't sleep after that. When morning came, I tried to talk to Beale, or Alice, or anyone, but the village was in full preparation now, dressed in strange robes of woven bark and animal hide. Symbols were painted on every surface, doors, stones, trees. Even the animals. The harp hole had been wrapped in dozens of silk-like strands, all drawn from the forest, and beneath it, a small wooden cart stood waiting, its contents hidden beneath a thick black shroud. I didn't want to know what was under it. The sun dipped, and the cold came fast. I took the map and the lantern and climbed to the ridge Alice had marked. From there, I could see everything. The villagers gathered in a wide circle around the harp hole. They began to chant, not loudly, but with rhythm, a dry, whispering cadence like leaves rubbing together in a windless wood. And then they brought out the cart. Two men wheeled it forward. The cloth was pulled back, and inside, was a child, no older than 9, a boy, wide-eyed and bound in woven ropes of bark and ash. He wasn't gagged. He didn't scream, just stared, blankly, like the life had already been drained from him. The villagers didn't pause, didn't hesitate. They lifted the boy, carried him to the base of the harp hole, and tied him upright, arms spread. He still didn't make a sound. Then they stepped back, and the chapel bell rang once. Flames leapt from the earth, not from a torch, not from flint. They just appeared, crawling up the harp pole like fingers, licking at the wooden lattice with an unnatural hunger. The boy still didn't scream, but something else did. From the trees beyond the field, I heard it, a sound like nothing I've ever heard before. Heart howl, heart moan, heartbroken machinery. It didn't echo, it devoured space, sucked in all other sound. The villagers dropped to their knees, faces in the dirt, and then it stepped from the woods. It was tall, impossibly so. Its limbs were thin and shifting, as though made of smoke or shadow. Where its face should have been, there was a knot of bone and bramble. Its fingers trailed behind it like roots, dragging through the earth, hissing with steam. It moved slowly, deliberately, and every step it took, the fire on the heart pole grew brighter. The boy's body sagged, still silent, and when the creature reached the heart pole, it bowed, not to the villagers, but to something behind them. I turned my eyes to the forest edge and saw dozens more shapes, watching, unmoving. The creature reached out, touched the fire with its root-like hand, and just like that, the flames vanished. The boy's body fell forward, ash and bone, nothing left. The villagers rose, as one, their faces blank and pale and empty. The creature receded into the woods. The shadows swallowed it whole, and the chant began again, soft, endless. I didn't remember walking back to the cottage, only that I was inside it again, the door bolted, the map torn and discarded at my feet. The lantern had gone out somewhere on the path, but I hadn't noticed. I sat there until morning, staring at nothing. The boy's face, or lack of reaction, was burned into my thoughts. So was the creature's bow. That thing, that monster, had bowed, like it was thankful. By noon, I emerged. The village was back to normal. The strange symbols had been scrubbed away. The heart pole stripped down to bare wood again. The chapel's windows gleamed clean. Mr. Beale was tending to his roses. He waved when he saw me, as if none of it had happened. Alice came to me once more. Her eyes were clearer now, not calm, but resolved. She led me quietly, carefully, out past the chapel, beyond the elder stones, into the trees. We walked for nearly an hour, until the forest began to change. The trees grew too close together. The bark twisted like rope. The branches creaked even without wind. At the center of it all was a glade, circular, unnaturally perfect, and at its center, a stone slab, cracked and blackened, half swallowed by the roots of a gnarled, leafless tree. Alice pointed to it. This is where it began. According to her, Willowvale had never belonged to people, long before the village, before roads, before even recorded history. Something had taken root in this patch of earth, something older than the forest. The first settlers came from the north, escaping war, famine, or something worse. They found the land rich, soil dark as ink, rivers clean and full, but something lived beneath it, something that watched. The first winter nearly destroyed them. Crops died overnight, livestock vanished, and then the dreams began. Shared visions, every villager, the same images, the same voice. It offered survival in exchange for a life each year, one soul, chosen, prepared. And in return, Prosperity, it was never forced, but the alternative was famine, disease, madness. I listened, and for the first time, felt the full weight of it. This wasn't just ritual. It was infrastructure. Willowvale didn't just survive because of that thing. It existed because of it. Why the boy? I asked. Alice looked down. Because he's always the quiet one. The ones who don't cry, don't scream, are chosen faster. I was going to be sick. I leaned against the twisted tree, breathing through my teeth, trying not to retch. That thing in the woods. It's not even the worst of them. Is it? She shook her head. It's the one we can see, the only one that lets us look. I wanted to leave, pack my things and run, but Alice warned me, you can't leave until the soil lets you. If you try, the forest folds in. People vanish every year trying. Why me? I asked. You're the first outsider they've let this close in over 50 years. What happens to the others? She didn't answer. I returned to the village and tried again, to speak to Beale, or anyone, but they were already acting like I belonged, inviting me to meetings, handing me parcels of food, calling me by my first name now. You should come for spring planting, one of them said. It's a blessing to share the first seed. It sounded benign, but I knew better. That night, I searched the chapel, alone. The floorboards creaked too softly, like they'd learned to absorb footsteps. Beneath the altar, I found a hatch. Inside, a vault. Old scrolls, bones that didn't belong to animals. And at the very back, a book bound in pale leather, with no title. Its pages were drawings, circles, roots, diagrams of human bodies spliced with trees. On the final page, a child's face, expressionless, mouth stitched shut, eyes hollow. Below it, one phrase, give and be spared. I don't remember how I left the chapel. I remember the smell, though, not of death, but of rot, slow, damp decay, like the air beneath a swamp. It clung to me all the way home. That night, I dreamed. I stood in the clearing again, but this time, I was the one bound to the harpole, and around me, 100 villagers, chanting, faces blank, and among them, one moved differently, slower. Alice, she wasn't smiling. But she wasn't crying either, just watching. I woke drenched in sweat. The floor beneath me was damp, as if the earth itself was breathing up through the boards. I left the cottage at dawn, packed only a journal, a recorder, and the lantern. I would leave by foot. No road, just forest. I had to try. The forest didn't resist at first. The trees were silent, the birds gone. After an hour, I realized the path was gone too. I walked in a straight line, using the sun, but the trees began to twist around again, forming arches, tunnels, spirals. And then I heard it again, the moan, that terrible, mechanical cry from the night before. I turned, and there it was. Not the tall one. This one was smaller, hunched, covered in moss and black veins. It didn't move like a beast. It crawled, no legs, just arms, dragging its bloated belly. Its face was buried in roots, only a single, puckered mouth visible. It opened, and from it came my own voice, screaming. I ran, didn't care where, just away. Branches whipped at my face, roots grabbed at my boots, and when I finally fell, there was Alice, standing at the edge of the clearing. She held out her hand. Now you understand. Alice knelt beside me, eyes distant. I wanted to scream, to run again, to wake up from it. But this was no dream. The forest had sealed itself. The air was too heavy to deny. I tried to stop them once. She whispered. I begged them to let 1 year pass. Just one. And her voice cracked. My sister was taken instead. Not by the creature, but by the roots. What do you mean? They grow up through your bed and take you from underneath. No mess, no blood, just gone. I had no more questions, just choices. She led me back to the village, not to my cottage, but to the chapel. It was midnight again. The harp hole stood rebuilt, thicker now, wound in fresh bark. The crowd gathered in silence. No chants, no songs, only the presence. It pressed in from all sides. Like the forest had eyes now. Two figures stepped forward, the Beals. Their faces were clean, but solemn. Between them stood the boy again, the same child, his eyes hollow, like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't cry, didn't speak. He was prepared. Then Alice turned to me. It doesn't have to be him, not if you step forward. Everything inside me locked into place, because I understood. This wasn't about sacrifice anymore. It was about inheritance. I had been brought here, invited, observed, welcomed. They weren't showing me a secret. They were passing the burden. You want me to offer myself? I asked. Alice didn't answer. The villagers all watched now. No expressions, no movement, just waiting. I looked down at the boy. His arms were limp, his mouth sewn shut, but not with thread, with vine. The Beals stepped back. The pole loomed, and from the woods, the groaning began. The thing was coming again. In that moment, I made my choice. I stepped forward. The boy was taken aside. His parents said nothing, not even a thank you, just silence. Alice held the ropes. She didn't speak as she bound my wrists, but when she tied the last knot, she leaned close. This doesn't end here. It never does. But someone has to remember. The groaning deepened, and out of the trees came the figure, not crawling this time, walking, tall, draped in robes of decayed leaves and ash-black fur, its arms too long, legs bending the wrong way, where a face should be, a hole, wide and filled with flickering light. It stopped before me, tilted its head. It reached out, not with hands, but with branches, gnarled and moving like fingers, and it touched my chest. What I saw next wasn't vision, it was memory, but not mine. I saw the first offering, a girl, ancient beyond reason, kneeling in ice. I saw kings making pacts in blood, forests cut down and growing back in hours. I saw Willowvale flooded, burned, rebuilt. I saw every child taken, every parent choosing silence. I saw the roots of the world, deep, black, endless, and at their center, this thing, older than time, starving. Then, everything went dark. When I awoke, I was in the chapel, alone. Alice was gone, the harp hole dismantled. No villagers, just wind. I stood, weak, but whole. I opened the chapel doors, and Willowvale was empty. Every house stood, every garden bloomed, but not a single soul remained. The village was preserved, but abandoned, like they'd all simply vanished into the trees. I wandered for days, no food, no sounds, until one morning. I found a car on the road, dusty, but real. I climbed in, turned the key, and it started. The forest let me leave. When I reached the nearest town, I asked about Willowvale. No one had heard of it. Maps showed only forest, no roads in, no record of it ever existing. But I know what I saw. I know what I am now, because I still dream, and sometimes I hear it, the groaning, the whispering wind, calling me back. So if you're ever invited to a quiet village in the English countryside, if they offer you bread, show you kindness, smile too long, and never blink. If they ask you to stay for the festival, walk away, or you'll become part of the offering forever. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Willowvale may have disappeared from maps, but stories like these are never truly forgotten. If you enjoy these immersive folk horror tales, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay in the shadows with us. And remember, some invitations are meant to be refused.